The treatment that Lesserafim has been undergoing for the past few months is interesting to say the least. The slow burn of the group's hate started at debut and turned up full throttle during the infamous Easy Encores and subsequently the Coachella performances. Initially, I had attributed their hate train to the turn of the new year, because as unfortunate as it is, toxic K-pop stans always need a new girl group to bully annually. I've got it, Aespa got it, Ateez got it, the list goes on. It's almost like clockwork, how the seemingly minute occurrences that were a dime a dozen suddenly become witch hunt worthy at the drop of a hat. I'm talking about the vocal debacle. Far from being the first person to talk about it, I held a similar opinion to the consensus when the discussion was at its peak. It was clear to anybody with ears that the Lesserafim girls were struggling vocally. A lot. And work to improve needed to happen. As much pressure as they must feel to perform perfectly, no one else would ever be granted the same chances they are. No one else excuses their inability to do their job by complaining about how difficult it is. Imagine a surgeon explaining away losing a patient because they were feeling anxious that day. No one would take that seriously. While the stakes aren't nearly as high as an idol, there is an expectation to do your job, to sing. Whether they're failing to do so comes from a lack of vocal training or performance anxiety, it is their responsibility to deal with those complications. I don't have the desire for idols to feel as though they're unable to show vulnerabilities, or that they can't share troubles they're going through. That can be as easily taxing for your mental health. I only expect a level of professionalism that Lesserafim failed to show at the time. But now, that brings us to the present day. About 5 months later. And I had an epiphany after seeing the reactions to the newest Lesserafim documentary, Make It Look Easy. People were vicious, like truly out for blood in a way that I hadn't seen before, which surprised me. I knew they were getting picked apart incessantly, because that's the nature of the internet. But I swore I felt the moment the constructive criticism turned to outright vitriol. This particular situation revolves around a clip from the documentary that got people riled up. One where Sakura seemingly has a breakdown during singing practice, crippled by anxiety and presumably the weight of hate she's been getting for months now.
너 왜 이렇게 자신이 없어졌어? 그냥 멈다이 하면서 여기 꽂아야지. 야 왜? 아이고. 무서워.
If I didn't mention it before, the documentary filming is mainly from the end of the Anti-Fragile era to the end of the Unforgiven era. So no, this wasn't in response to the recent hate train. Anyway, the comments people were leaving ranged from cry harder to great acting in response to Sakura basically having a breakdown. The realization I mentioned earlier was built upon this very feedback. It was never about the singing. Because truly, what could possibly be the criticism now? That she cried? That she's justifiably afraid of being mocked and degraded in the public eye again? That she had a human response to the hate she received? I can't stress enough, she wasn't on stage or mid-performance. She was practicing and had a moment of weakness. It also doesn't help that I know for a fact that the bulk of people hating on the girl didn't even watch the full video in its entirety. Episode 3, if you'd like to actually watch the thing you're ridiculing her for. How do I know they didn't watch the whole video? It's because later in the same episode, it shows Sakura in other vocal practice sessions keeping her cool, showing that her crying was not a normal appearance. I've seen groups get hate before, but this specific situation struck me in a way I've never felt before. It took me a while to pinpoint the reason, but it's the complete and total lack of empathy. If you can watch people suffering from physical, mental, and emotional exhaustion, then proceed to dismiss it because you don't happen to agree with how someone else deals with their own emotions, or worse yet, laugh at them, I think you're a despicable person. All the documentary showed me was that K-pop stans love to kick people when they're already down. Because, and this is a genuine question, what are we still doing here? What is the point of the continued prodding? From the encore stages to now, the criticism hasn't changed, and yet the harassment is worse than it's ever been. Speaking of criticism, let's take a second to expound upon that. Constructive criticism is evaluating the quality of a piece of work, whether that's literary, musical, or artistic. It doesn't attack or insult the person behind it. It focuses on weaknesses and informs on where and how improvements are needed. Destructive criticism doesn't care about the improvement of art, but rather demeans the artwork and the artist all the same. Usually for the sake of causing people to withdraw from the public altogether, also known as bullying. Does anyone care to take a guess on what this timely example with Sakura is? Don't worry, I'll give you a minute. I know it's a difficult question. Alright, I've given you enough time, but also I don't want to be copyrighted. It's bullying. It's just straight up bullying. I want to make it clear. I'm not here to convince anybody to start supporting Lesserafim, or that the group is suddenly granted immunity from criticism because of people bullying them. Rather, I think K-pop stans need to learn the lesson of simply letting go. If you do not like Lesserafim, let it go. If you think they're talentless, they're not. Let it go. If you stan Lesserafim at one point, but that decision changed after the encores, then take a page out of my book and unstan them. And then move the fuck on with your life. There is no benefit or gain to be had revisiting a topic that has basically been beaten into every fan at this point. The girls themselves are aware of it, clearly, and whether or not they choose to do something about it has nothing to do with you if you aren't a fan. And if you need me to explain why making fun of people online is a bad thing, you're too far gone at this point. The only reason that people are as bold as they are is because of the anonymity that being online grants them. And I'm not even gonna beat around the bush. This one's for you, sultry film, who pushed this issue to the forefront. I truly hope, from the bottom of my heart, that one day you find enough happiness and fulfillment in your life so that you don't post all of the hateful ass content that you do, thinking that it could ever hope to rectify the gaping chasm that is your self-esteem. I mean, what else could drive you to do something so desperate for attention and validation than indiscriminately shitting on people who don't even know you exist? How big and brave you must have felt, making fun of a public figure, laughing at the very fear you've helped perpetuate behind an AI voice, no face, and no personality to speak of, other than being a miserable wreck that profits off of other people's guilty pleasure for drama and gossip. If you had even a little bit more backbone, I just might be able to take whatever you say seriously. Coward. What makes it ironic is that the K-pop community is easily the biggest one that constantly preaches about the importance of mental health, and yet pounces on the next idol that shows the slightest bit of weakness. It really is that an idol's mental health matters until it is the next girl group's turn to be the K-pop stan punching bag. Anyway, the last thing I want to end on will probably be my final statement on the matter. Nothing, absolutely nothing that these girls have done warrants this amount of hate. They're getting more backlash than actual criminals in the K-pop industry, and that to me is insane. That being said, thanks for watching, and I'll see y'all next time. Bye-bye.